Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the 6th turn of the Shadow Tech Goddess, subtitled Cat, Part 2, Chapter 6, Baked Chicken. And Baked Chicken has the distinction of being the final chapter in Part 2. Next week will be Chapter 1 of Part 3. There's 4 parts in this book, and we are almost, but not quite, in the center of the book. If you hear a little noise in the background, that is a fan. It is over 100 degrees outside, and it's a little warm in here, so please pardon my fan. Previous chapter, we see the same scene that we covered, I believe, in Chapter 1, where Kat was suspended from a hook, and a waiting basin of fire threatened to eat her alive, but she was saved by a pair of angels. Well, we saw in the previous chapter, those angels are in fact Aram and Alesta. They came to get Kat away from the Shade Church because they had selected her from a list of thousands of names to be a Covis replacement for Lord Belmont's murdered love. And Lord Belmont's having quite a hard time. We haven't seen him in the book yet. We'll get to him in the next chapter. Aram and Alesta were horrified by what they saw. The brief glimpse at the cruelty that happens in the Shade Church. They discovered Kat. She was tiny. She was filthy. She stank to high heaven. But they were still hopeful that their selection had been a proper one. And unfortunately, they weren't able to take her from the Shade Church. The Black Hats would not allow it. They accelerated her training and then sent her to Cana in the horrid atmosphere suit. And we saw all that in the first part of the book. Now, as we end Part 2, we see Aram and Alesta having to defend their choice. They were given pretty much carte blanche to make the selection, and now they have to defend it. And they're not defending it against just anybody. They're defending it against the gods. And the gods had a certain set of expectations when it came to this search for the Covis, for the replacement for Lady Gwendolyn. And I wonder if the scrawny, filthy, stinky cat from the depths of the Black Abyss's pits meets those expectations. We will see. In the previous Shadow Tech Goddess book, Book 8, known as Stenabel, where Belmont in a different universe is a girl instead of a guy, it was Alesta who took the charge and was her mentor, was her inspiration, who gave her confidence, who instructed her on what she needed to do. You know, she loved both of them, Aram and Alesta, but it was mostly Alesta who gave her the tough love she needed, who gave her the good advice, was the supportive ear, became her confidant, and Alesta showed that she's capable of delivering all of those things and more in an efficient manner. Without Alesta's help, Stenabel probably wouldn't have been successful in her mission and her personal growth. This book features Aram more. This is Aram's turn to shine, and we'll see if that shy young man from the Admiral's office, the guy who would get berated by Admiral Derleth in public and just take it with a silence and a smile, if he's up to what's coming, if he's up to talking back to the gods. We'll see. We will see. So let's dig in, shall we? Part 2, Chapter 6, Baked Chicken. Aetha, the Shadow Tech Goddess, or whatever she chose to call herself, was furious. She loomed over Aram and Alesta, the purple light from her visor staining the pools of blood on the floor a dark black. "This is the one you picked?" She spat, her voice shallow with anger. "This?" Aram and Alesta leaned over Kat's twisted body, blood all around her. Another body lay nearby, throat ripped out, covered in dry blood. Aram and Alesta had seen it all from the fountain at Mons Eagle, and it had been horrifying. These two had fought to the death. Kat, their adopted daughter, and the one called Wheel. Wheel, dead. Kat, mortally wounded, soon to follow. Another body lay near the wall, a twisted-up corpse draped in black feathers. The one Kat had named Bird. Horribly murdered. They held Kat's hand. It was limp and clammy. They fretted over the terrible gaping wound Wheel had dealt her, her chest bubbling with Shadowtech poison. They tried to stem the bleeding, but there was no stopping it. "She's bleeding out. I can feel her ribs through this hole," Aram said. "She needs help. Can you help her?" Atha placed her hands on her hips. I had hopes that you two would steer right and make a good choice. I'd hoped we'd all get out of this mess smelling like a rose. I thought you two were cute. You both impressed me with a good head on your shoulders, and that's hard to do. I tend to be a cynic. It's easy for the gods to be cynics. Now look at where we are, standing in the bloody dark with Bellathauser laughing at us from the safety of her spiral ladder. And I've got a twig-like black hat in front of me who smells like yesterday's dinner. You expected this to replace Arcade Argamane's dead Murthig? What's she gonna do? Bore him to death? Alesta looked up scornfully at Atha. She's going to die. Are you going to help her or not? Atha kicked Wheel's body over. Dead, nude, covered in blood, throat gone. Why bother? Ha! At least this one's got a little meat on her bones. Not a ratted up string bag like the one you foolishly picked. Aram struggled to pick up Kat's twisted body. Bear, please help me. Together, Aram and Alesta picked Kat up off the floor. Where are you two headed? Atha asked. We're taking her out of the dark, Alesta said. We're going to help her if we can, since you will not. We need light and air. They shambled away towards the distant stairs. Atha watched them depart. You know who you're talking to? Do you? You know what I could do to you both? They didn't answer. They began the long climb up the stairs to daylight, carrying Kat's tiny body between them. Atha called to them. If she dies along the way, we're done. Got me? Done! And you know what that means if that happens. They moved down the hillside, seeing the statues the demon had defaced. Atha's words followed them as they hurried into the ruins, the both of them wondering with every step whether Kat would expire. Somehow, she continued to breathe, continued to live. They brought Kat back to her home, the ruin she had selected. Here, in the dusty rooms of hard stone, they saw the little pile of books she had collected, but couldn't possibly know how to read. Her clothes they had provided for her, the empty containers of food Alesta had made, the anti-Shadowtech centrils Fiddler Crow had designed, and the centerpiece of it all, the photograph of Lord Belmont, decorated with carefully placed rocks and little trinkets of woven grasses. Much of the lavender soap Alesta had given her was molded into little pink figurines of peoples and animals, some crafted with remarkable skill. The one named Bird had made those. All her keepsakes and sole possessions of the world were carefully cherished in this dusty room. They laid her out on the carved floor and removed her bloody clothing. She had gained a little bit of weight, in both fat and muscle, since she first arrived, eating the food Alesta had made for her, her body no longer the skinny pile of bones it once was. Her skin was relatively clean from washing in the cistern, rubbed smooth with rocks, and despite not using the soap they had provided for her, the vile, choking stench she once bore from Shade Church was thankfully gone. Her hair was still a mess, a hopeless tangle of matted and snarled platinum blonde locks. Her hands were clotted with blood from Wheel, whom she had killed. Alesta wept as she looked at her. Cruel Shadowtech claws sprouted from Kat's hands, and an uncomfortable-looking framework of Shadowtech was fastened to her arms, torso, and legs, forcing her into a contorted, crouching position like a tiger. A long tail sprouted from the base of her spine. "Look at all this," Alesta said, cradling her. "These claws, this Shadowtech bitten into her flesh. She sleeps on the naked stone like an animal. No pillow, no padding. They tore up the ones we gave them. Look at all the pain she's endured. She's never known a day's worth of comfort or love. We loved her, Bear. We gave her hope." The Shadowtech framework was horrifying to look at. Aram took the centrils and placed them around Kat's body. Instantly, the Shadowtech fell apart into cinders, claws gone, tail gone, framework gone, allowing them to lay her out flat. Alesta stroked her blonde hair, snarled and bedraggled, a hopeless mess. Aram checked the wound in her chest, and it was terrible. A folded piece of paper lay nearby. Aram glanced at it. It said, "Dearest Kat, soon our Lord Belmont is coming. It won't be long. He has lost so much, right here in these very ruins. Every year he comes to stand here where his love and his spirit died. He is a shell of his former self. It is our hope that you will help him rediscover himself, and in the process, discover yourself as well. We selected you from a universe of candidates. There is so much potential in your heart just waiting to come out. We have seen it, such that we have entrusted the soul and the well-being of our dear friend to you. We love you." "Why did you write her that letter, Bear?" Aram asked. "You know she can't read." "I wanted to inspire her, to create some mystery, to drive her to learn what the letter said. I guess the Shadowtech demon would have read it to her. I didn't know it'd create such strife." "So, is she dead?" came Atha's voice from across the room. Clacking on her black heels, she entered and moved towards them, one deliberate step at a time, her starry cape fluttering lightly, the top of her face hidden under her helmet. "This little creature you staked everything on, is she dead?" Aram took Kat's hand. "No, she lives, but just barely." Atha looked around the room, seeing nothing but dust and ruins. "Well then, I lost that bet, I suppose. You all ready to admit the poor choice you made? You ready to begin your punishment for failure?" Alesta hugged Kat around the neck and shoulders, protecting her. Aram stood, tiny but defiant, before a goddess. "We didn't make a mistake. We chose correctly. I'm more certain of it now, more than ever." Atha scoffed, her helmet glinting in the dim light. "Yeah? You selected an unimpressive, filth-covered twig from the Black Hat's basement. I saw the list Fiddler Crow gave you. I went over the names. There were warlords and marists from the height of Zaphan's society. There were real Black Hats listed. A couple of sisters mixed in there too. Some fleet officers, warbird captains, members of the learned and the chaste, of the hospitallers and the science ministry. Some pretty impressive names there. There was even a frickin' Brantball player on the list. How cool would that have been?" She ground her teeth in a threatening manner. "So tell me, why this homely little nobody? And your explanation had better be good. Otherwise, I'm going to disincorporate the three of you right here and now and punch my own ticket to the hell of the gods. I'm probably going to be heading there anyways for all of this." Tears dripped down Alesta's face. She gripped Kat tighter. Aram stood there, unafraid. He waited a moment and then walked across the floor, passing Atha along the way. "Excuse me," he said as he passed. He located the pile of ceramic containers holding the food they had been sending her. He rummaged through the containers and selected one, bringing it to Atha. "Here," he said, holding it out. "This is why we picked her." Atha's lip curled in incredulous disgust. "What's this?" She looked into the container, seeing a few pieces of baked chicken and a simple peppery sauce. "What's this?" Aram asked. "This is everything. This little girl who seems like nothing to you shines with rare light, and these few pieces of food prove it. She saved this food for the one she called Wheel. She set it aside in the event Wheel would emerge from the depths, hungry, in need of food. That same Wheel who tried to kill her, and whose throat she was forced to tear out. The concept of sharing, of consideration, of sisterhood, and yes, of love, should be unknown to her, but she embraced them. She has endured more pain than anyone should ever be expected to. It's all she's ever known, and yet she still shines. Wheel behaved as Cat should have given her background. Ruthless, selfish, obsessed with power, wanting nothing more than to inflict all the pain she'd felt in Shade Church on others. Yet our Cat stayed in this place for love, for the promise of love. Love is something she's never known. It's yet another concept she barely understands, and yet she clung to it, keeping her sane through the darkness, allowing her to rise above the horrors of Shade Church. And she managed to share her dreams with her companions, to enrich them, to save them from becoming mindless, hate-filled black hats, with the prospect of a better life based on love. Though she was terrified, love drove her into the depths to try to save her companions, whom she loved. This little girl did that, with no guidance. Atha glanced at Cat's hands, clotted with blood. Innocent, huh? She did what she had to. Isn't that what's expected of all of us? For all these things, this tiny soul is the person who can save our Lord and make right this place. And if you can't see that, if you're fixated on ritzy names, on Maris and warlords and brandball players, then you're just as bad as Wheel and the bloody demon. Atha snickered. Am I? She turned to walk away. Don't you turn your back on her! Aram shouted. Atha stopped in her tracks. She turned to them, lips pursed, eyes hidden behind her blaring purple visor. Aram wondered if this was it, if he had angered a goddess. Alesta, he whispered, run, flee, save yourself. If there's killing here, I'll endure it. Go! Alesta took his hand, not budging. Atha saw this and smiled. You know, you never fail to amaze me. I threaten you with obliteration, and you respond to me with baked chicken. It takes some dash. She laughed and leaned down and looked at Cat's pale, skinny body with a new appreciation. You know, I like the two of you. You're both full of surprises, which is good. Even a goddess likes to be surprised every so often. You've given me a skinny little black hat trainee with an unsightly bird's nest of hair and a pair of bee stings for tits, and you sell her to me like a champ, like a real pro. Atha threw up her hands. Okay, you got me. I'm sold. You made a good choice. I'll admit it. Alesta was full of hope. Then you'll save her? Heal her wounds? Sure. Cat gasped and convulsed a little. Alesta felt her hand move. Atha went to the window and looked out. There. Easy, wasn't it? You said she had no guidance. You're wrong. She had the two of you. If you can inspire me, you can inspire her too. Every day she lives to see the dawn, she has the pair of you to thank for it. Not just for today, but for seeing her in the darkness of Shade Church. I suppose you're right. I wouldn't have noticed her. But fortunately you two did. Atha placed her hand on her chin and gave Cat another appraisal. Would you like me to jazz her up a little? Maybe a little padding on the rear end, some hip action, maybe some semblance of a chest? Alesta lovingly looked Cat over. Our Lord requires none of those things. He will accept her as she is. I think she's beautiful. Then you're easily impressed, aren't you? Fine, suit yourself. Now, I'm going to blank her memory a bit to wash away all this unpleasantness today. She'll remember the things she needs to know, but her companions and all this bloodletting, she won't remember a thing. We don't want her wandering off. This is the place where she needs to be, right? It is, Aram said. Belle will be here shortly to mourn the anniversary of Gwen's death. Fine. Sounds good. Also, I noticed there's a Black Hat's missile sitting outside just waiting for the sisters to come along and discover it. If they do that, they'll be crawling over this place, and no centrills ever made will keep them from sniffing her out and butt-dragging her off to Valenhelm or Twilight 4 for a killing. I'm going to get rid of the missile for you. Think nothing of it. So, when can we expect our boy, the Kadar Gamain, to show up? 2 weeks. Good. So our little blind date is in the offing. I hope our girl here makes a good showing. Alesta doted on the unmoving cat. You're going to be amazed. Cat's going to be a true lady from day one. Our Lord will be impressed by her grace and civility. It won't be long before he cherishes her. Aetha shook her head. Okay, let's get this show rolling. It's time for our girl here to get to saving the universe. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 6, Baked Chicken. And we also conclude Part 2 of the book. Next week, we continue with Part 3, Cat. And the first chapter is titled Lord Belmont. So we've been hearing about this guy throughout the book. And we've seen him, if you're familiar with my previous books. He's been the main character since book 6, Lord Belmont, Paymaster Stenstrom. In this book, we haven't seen him in the flesh as of yet. So we see Aram and Aetha having quite a confrontation. Aetha was pretty hot. And as Aetha is oftentimes known as the goddess of occasional chaos, she can occasionally be chaotic, and she has a bit of a saucy temper. And when she gets pretty mad, she can haul off and do some pretty disturbing things. Aram faced up to this goddess. He found it within him to argue on Kat's behalf, to make some good points. He still really doesn't know whether Kat is a good choice, a good Kova, so I think he feels it. He and Alesta become very attached to Kat these weeks as she's grown in the ruins of Clovis with her sisters. I think he genuinely believes they made a good choice, and they convinced Aetha that they made a good choice too. She was threatening to obliterate them, but decided not to, which is a good thing. And Aetha actually likes Aram and Alesta a lot. Even when she's at her most angry, she can still be reasoned with, and Aram managed to do that in this case. So, that's the end of Part 2, Demon, Spiralata, and Covis. We continue next week. Part 3, Cat, Chapter 1, Lord Belmont, where Paymaster Stenstrom finally makes his debut in this book, and we see what goes from there. So then, until next week, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.